All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is the Mark Thompson Show. Hi, Albert.
Good morning, Kim. Happy hump day. We're halfway there.
Yeah,
the week is almost done.
We are. We're halfway through Mark's vacation, too. So I'm counting the days until he comes back. I talked to him last night. He's still off the coast of Peru, but still seemed like he was having a pretty good time. So that's cool. The big news, of course, is that the Colorado Supreme Court has eliminated Trump's name from the primary ballot in 2024, pending appeal. So they've given him until January 4th to appeal. He says he's going to do this, but huge move. So last night it's big news, and Mark, of course, has been in touch through the whole vacation, and I sent him the message that this has happened, and he's like, oh. And so then we recorded a little something last night, and I sent up the bat signal for experts to weigh in. And what happened is something I'm really proud of. It's the first Mark Thompson Show expert panel, and the video of that is coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll play that. We also have John Rothman in the wings. So we're going to talk politics with John Rothman as well. Maria Baltazzi, who's produced reality shows like Survivor, has written a book about kind of guiding people to find their true happiness. And Mark did an interview with her. So we'll have that later on in the show as well. Little Law and Disorder. It's a full show. It's going to be a great day.
What?
Thank you for being here. Yes, if you could click the like button, we would love it.
With your iron rod.
Oh, yeah, baby. Smash it. And if you could subscribe, if you haven't, that would be great for us too. Share the show, especially the parts that you love. Share it and let people know that we're out here doing this. We need it. We also need your support. You can find us at themarkthompsonshow.com, themarkthompsonshow.com. And so let's get on with the show. First of all, we're going to dig into this Colorado ballot issue with the Mark Thompson Show Dream Team. So let's get right to it, Albert.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Yep, that's right. It is the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you so much for joining us. I had to come on and talk immediately about what happened. Hi, Mark Thompson. Oh, wait.
Kim,
I'm messing it up all over the place.
This
Listen, this isn't what has normally happened this week. This is a total mistake. Okay?
You want
to
it has a loop thing on it. If you have that clicked, then it will continue to loop.
I fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good.
So today you're floating off the coast of Lima, Peru somewhere.
Yeah,
And-
we're on our way to South America. That's exactly right. We're on our way to, further south.
And I see this headline. The headline is that Colorado Supreme Court removes Trump from the state's 2024 ballot. So I text you, and we've been going back and forth. And let me tell you how I feel about it.
Yeah,
Thank
we've been
God.
disagreeing on this. So go ahead, please.
I feel like there is this portion, this clause of the 14th Amendment for a reason. It is not willy-nilly that the founders wrote the Constitution. They didn't just put stuff in there to put stuff in. And what you have is proof, I believe, that Trump stirred up this insurrection. Even as late as yesterday, there was word that people were keeping it quiet, that he had actually been contacting people that were involved in the insurrection. So I think there's proof that he stirred up this insurrection. And even if there wasn't, we have it on videotape of him, nearby or wherever he was at the Capitol that day, and his words are enough for me. So to me, they're upholding the flavor and the letter of the law.
So this was a constitutional provision that was put in after the Civil War, as you're aware. Mm-hmm. And it was during a time where there obviously was, we had a civil war. There were those dug in on either side and legit insurrectionists. And I'm not even arguing that Trump himself isn't a legit insurrectionist. I'm not arguing at all that Trump isn't deserving of being given the boot on some level. But what I am very concerned with, and I feel it's a huge mistake, is this entire emergency escape hatch that allows you to erase candidates from the ballot. It will be yet another way that our system, flawed as it's incredibly been, I mean, the Electoral College being the front and center flaw of our electoral system for president, I'm talking about, it'll be yet another way that the system becomes flawed. This is going to become the new way to pursue political ends by erasing from the ballot candidates that you're not happy with. And so, again, you know me on Donald Trump. Don't want him anywhere near the White House, even on a tour. But the fact is, this is, in my view, a very, very dangerous precedent. Now, to the merits of it, many may say in defense of Trump, well, he was never convicted of anything. He's never really been charged with anything. Well, the reality is the stipulation in the Constitution is such that you don't actually have to be convicted of anything, which makes it even, in a sense, more dangerous. And you can say, what do you mean? Like, look at what Kim's just said. I mean, we've got evidence. The history around January 6th is replete with evidence that Trump may have stirred it up and actually fomented it. Okay, but what I would say,
replete and fomented, double ding, right there.
Okay, double ding, and what I would say is, well, I can argue the other side of that. I can argue that Trump was just pursuing his First Amendment rights. He was wrong not to stop it. And he might have been wrong to foment it, don't get me wrong, but I'm just talking about the legal side of it. And so you begin this tug of war over what the actual specifics are on any one candidate. And so let's think beyond Trump now. Let's think beyond Trump. And the fact is that beyond Trump, you can build whatever case you want for whatever candidate you want off the ballot. And then finally, let me go to the practical. From a practical standpoint, Trump is not going to win Colorado anyway, so this doesn't matter. And in the states that it does matter, you'll never get him off the ballot. You're not going to get him off the ballot in South Carolina. So this is going to become a thing. It's going to be the new game where you remove candidates that weren't going to win. You could remove them from the state of California, for example. It's not going to matter. It's not going to win California. And a GOP candidate is not going to win California for president. So you see how this is going to become yet another game that is played. And I think it's going to be played by the major political parties in ways that will further denigrate the political system. That's where I am.
So let's roll back for just a moment, because I feel like when you say it's just going to become the new political tool, well, I can see that with the impeachment, because you can start an impeachment inquiry for someone for anything. But to incite an insurrection has to be pretty specific. So that you would say that this could then be used as a tool down the line seems a little bit, I don't know.
Does it or doesn't it? Can't I?
It seems beyond, because you would have to have another insurrection. I mean, how often does that happen?
No, you can. I can say that you were involved in attempts at insurrection based on your podcast, if I wanted to. I could say that your podcast has fomented enough unrest and has created enough doubt that it's undermined the confidence in the government of the United States of America. And therefore, you are insurrectionist, and therefore you should be removed from the ballot. You see how, you're interpreting it in a very strict way, perhaps, but you can begin to broaden the interpretation. And this is what autocrats do. This is what the beginning of making the law, and I use it in sort of air quotes, work for you, does. And in so doing, you undermine the political system. Again, I remind you, I'm not a fan of Trump. I want him nowhere near Washington. I want him nowhere near the presidency. But I know something like this can really be a genie that you cannot get back into the bottle.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I'll ask the question, and I'm bringing in the big guns tonight on the Mark Thompson Show. If that's the case, then why even have the law or have this be a clause in the Constitution at all? I welcome to the Mark Thompson Show David K. Johnston, everybody, Pulitzer Prize winning author, amazing all-around person.
This is extraordinary. Wow.
David Katz, we're bringing the Davids in. They're going to get it.
Oh my God.
Hi,
hello,
boys.
everyone.
Wow.
Hi there.
Hi, David. It's
Let
really an honor to be on with you both.
Let me start with David Katz, the former federal prosecutor. You've got a background in the law. Tell me, if you could, look at what's happened today. Do you think this has any merit going toward the Supreme Court? Is it going to stick?
Well, first, let me say that I've been a fan of David K. Johnston for a long time, and this is the
Yes.
first time I've actually been on a split screen with you, and it's really a delight. And of course, to be with you, Mark, somewhere off the coast of South America, and Kim, my old friend from the Pat Thurston show. I was just on her show 10 minutes ago,
Awesome.
KCBS in the Bay Area.
That's awesome.
I think that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to take cert of this case, certiorari, and I think they're going to reverse it fairly summarily, saying that it's a political question. I'm not sure that that is what they ought to do under Colorado law and the U.S. Constitution 14th Amendment, because I think it actually is on solid ground. And if I could just go into that for 1 minute, the only reason that the trial court in Colorado didn't rule as the Colorado Supreme Court just did is because a lot of people think that judge kind of copped out, saying that Trump was not an officer of the United States. The Constitution 14th Amendment doesn't call out the president as one of the offices that an insurrectionist is disqualified on account of the insurrection. But people say it cannot be the intent of the Civil War Congress and the people who went to all the trouble to pass the 14th Amendment and amend the Constitution to allow what, Jefferson Davis to become the president of the United States, to allow Robert E. Lee to run for the presidency of the United States in 1870. That cannot have been the intent. It was obvious that they meant to cover the office of the president if the president was one of the people who participated in insurrection. And so what they did was they called out the minor officers to make sure that it was including these minor officers. But of course, the president was covered. The Colorado Supreme Court just ruled 4-3. What I just said is the law, that in fact, the Constitution includes the president. As to the rest of it, the trial court had held a trial. They had given Trump due process. They'd allowed the lawyers to argue and present evidence that he had not participated in the insurrection. And the trial court had found, based on the evidence and the law, that he had participated in the insurrection. Big surprise. We saw him incite the insurrection. We saw the inflammatory speeches. We saw him bring his followers to Washington. Let's be wild. We saw him not tamp down the insurrection while it was going on, marauding in the Capitol for 3.5 hours. And in fact, to send a very an inflammatory post, email about Pence, while Pence was being menaced with being hanged in the U.S. Capitol. So the court found that there had been this insurrection, that Trump had participated in it. They found that after due process. They found he was an officer covered by the 14th Amendment. And there it was. I understand your concern that someone could say about a Democrat or some president in the future that they had participated in insurrection by supporting Black Lives Matter demonstrations, or they had participated in the insurrection by not tamping down those nights of violence in Portland, Oregon. But I do kind of agree with Kim, and then I'll shut up. I kind of agree with Kim that while they could be invented and made up as to future people running for president, this one is real. This one is so genuine. This one is so factually based. They were marauding at the U.S. Capitol, just the sort of thing the insurrectionists would have done during the Civil War.
I'll take it over to you, David K. Johnston, as I bring Michael Schur onto the broadcast as well. Oh, look at all the people on the screen. Let's see what you have to say about this, David K. Johnston, your thoughts.
Well, I was reading the dissent while David Katz was talking, the dissents. I think it's very important to understand that there is no execution method, not killing people, but how to carry out the law provision in the 14th Amendment. It doesn't say after a judicial proceeding or anything else. And David Katz is exactly right. You cannot imagine that the court, that the Congress meant to say in the 14th Amendment, oh, by the way, Jefferson Davis, he can run for president. Robert E. Lee, he can run for president. Clearly, they understood that they were barring things like that unless large supermajorities of Congress granted waivers, in effect, granted forgiveness. You do not need to engage in insurrection to be denied the ballot. The 14th Amendment in Section 3 says insurrection or rebellion or give aid or comfort. Well, Donald Trump did nothing for 187 minutes, more than 3 hours. There's testimony that he sat there saying, "Isn't this great? Isn't this wonderful?" He gave aid and he gave comfort. Interestingly, the court doesn't go into that because the people who brought the case, who are, by the way, all Republicans and one independent. There are no Democrats in this case. Republicans and independents, and an independent brought this case. They framed it in terms of committing insurrection. I don't know what the Supreme Court will do, given that the Constitution says that states will determine their elections unless Congress passes a law that is takes over. I don't think the Supreme Court has any more business hearing this case than it did hearing the case of Gore v. Bush, which should have been decided solely by the Florida Supreme Court under that part of the Constitution.
Now, that's interesting. I don't mean to, but David Katz, we could just throw it back to you for a moment. That's a really interesting point that David K. Johnson's making. He's saying the Supreme Court shouldn't even hear this. Could you speak to that?
Well, there is an issue legally whether there's a federal question. Trump's going to say that he has some kind of federal right to run in every state in the union. But the counter to that is that, and people aren't used to it because we're used to the blue and the red board that appears on national TV. And, people are all saying, well, what do we even need electoral college for? We should get rid of the electoral college, but we haven't. We vote state by state, and states are allowed to set their own terms and conditions of voting. It's very, very irksome, isn't it, when that happens with one of these southern states that's denying the vote to black people, that's gerrymandering and all that sort of thing. But the reality is that you start with the idea that the states do control their own processes unless there's some federal constitutional right that makes the state give way. And the argument's going to be that this was done completely properly under Colorado law. There was a trial, there was due process, there was no violation of the federal Constitution anyway here. And so you have...
Okay, you got me. The phone works. It's not right at the moment because my wife and I are both on it. But call me back on this number in, 50 minutes, okay?
You may want to mute David for the moment.
Yeah,
okay, but, go ahead.
Where were we, Mark? Sorry.
David Katz. Yeah, so you were saying that it's a state, that the states control their own destiny in terms of, it may not be a pretty thing, but you're saying the states control the way that they...
And the U.S. Supreme Court, could say that in this case, just like they could have said it in Bush v. Gore and let Florida decide its own processes for recounting the Florida vote in that state. But if you're betting, bet on the U.S. Supreme Court with the two arch conservatives and the three acting as sort of lackeys for Trump, that there are 5 votes there. And they might even get Roberts on this one. And maybe, Mark, because the moderates and liberals on the court are so worried about this as a precedent, and they realize they're going to lose anyway, this might actually be unanimous. I don't think so. There's no way it's unanimous the other way because Alito and Thomas want to take this case desperately and do something with it. They'll probably dissent if they turn down cert. It only covers Colorado law, but obviously, Mark, this would be a huge incentive, right, to the other states, to swing states like Pennsylvania, where it'd make a huge difference for them to proceed and for the judges to not be, in my view, kind of timid so far, saying in state after state it's a political question, saying that, we see the argument, but we're not going to do it, saying that the president's not an officer. So it would only technically cover Colorado law, but it would be, I think already it's going to have political momentum. I'd like to hear what the others have to say. But
yeah, just on that point.
I think it's going to help Nikki Haley right now.
Right. Michael Shore, I want to talk to you about that because I was making the point before everybody joined that I felt that this is, in a way, just from a practical standpoint, in a state that isn't particularly a swing state. I think it's a foregone conclusion. This becomes just another political vehicle that can be manipulated and used in red states against blue candidates and blue states against red candidates. That was my general argument. But what I'm asking you, since you've just come back from a Trump rally, is what you're covering a Trump rally. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
But what are the political realities of something like this? I mean, how does this? Yeah.
The political realities are it's too early to tell, right? I mean, everybody, and I think we all know this, sort of processes things through the prism of politics now. So whenever you have a ruling like this, or whenever there is a court that is acting, what's the first thing people say? who appointed these judges, right? What party are these judges with? Who was the governor when these judges? Well, it turns out all 7 were Democrats. But I say this only because this is the way that we look at things right now. And then what do we do? The way I think, because my mind is trained this way, is Neil Gorsuch is the son of Colorado. Maybe he'll want to defer to Colorado. Maybe there's more to this than we were thinking. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not even a legal expert. But when you look at this through the eyes of politics, and I've spent a lot of time on the road now with Trump supporters, I mean, really since 2015, but acutely recently as well, is that you see that they are pointing to how haphazard things are on the other side. And just this conversation that the Davids are having tells you that you see that, you have a ruling like this, you start thinking, well, this is a state law, but it's a federal constitution. How does the state prosecute on the U.S. Constitution rather than on the state constitution? All of these things muddy the water, and they, on the other side, the Trump supporters will look at this as, everything is haphazard, everything's a mess. They're grasping at straws constantly just because they don't want Donald Trump to run. So the political ramifications, I would guess, are going to make Trump a victim in some way. And I think that reversing this decision, if the Supreme Court does it, is actually going to make many Democrats breathe a sigh of relief. But this is sort of like, going to breaking news, reporting exactly what happened when the plane crashed, but not really knowing what happened. So it is probably too soon to say exactly what happened or what will happen and how this is going to be digested politically. But everything is political now.
Yeah, David K. Johnston, it's interesting because the truth is, David K. Johnston, that, and you've reported, you've written about this chapter and verse literally in all your books on Trump. I mean, he plays the victim card so well. Does this help amplify that sort of message that he wants to communicate?
Oh, yes. Donald will use this to try and build support and find people who might be on the edge to go for him. But, the Constitution, as one justice observed, is not a suicide pact. And to allow someone who sought to overthrow the government and who has publicly declared his intent to be a dictator for one day, as we all know, dictators willingly give up their power, it is a suicide pact. Now, the Supreme Court is not going to look strictly to the law here. I agree with Michael and David Katz that we live in a world where politics are going to play an enormous part in this decision. But what happens when someone wants to say, we're going to ignore the Second Amendment? We're going to ignore any other amendment. How about the 13th Amendment? I wonder how Clarence Thomas would feel about that. We'll ignore the 13th Amendment, which prohibits slavery. So we need, it's not going to happen, but we really need to focus on principles. Now, the decision of the majority in the Colorado Supreme Court, I think, is well argued. Their fundamental argument is that it is ridiculous that Donald Trump's claim he wasn't an officer of the United States, and that the Article 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing. One of the dissents says, well, no, if Congress actually wanted to execute this, they would put in a provision requiring it. Lo and behold, you can be charged with insurrection. But it doesn't say in the 14th Amendment, people convicted of insurrection or rebellion. It says those who participated. And as I emphasized, and I hope in the Supreme Court that the Solicitor General who's going to be involved in this makes this point, all you have to do is give aid or comfort. That's all it takes, aid or comfort.
What bothers me is that the argument against doing this is, oh, it can be a political tool. But I'm left scratching my head at is, well, who gets to decide then which parts of the Constitution to enforce and which parts not to enforce? There's a reason that it's in there.
Well, even the dissenters in the Colorado case, at least the first two dissents, I've only read the first two, they seem to be very clear that if the issue was Donald Trump is not yet 35 years old, or he is not a natural-born citizen, that would be a wholly different matter. And the state of Colorado could decide that because it's pretty easy to establish that through things like birth records or announcements in the Honolulu newspapers in June of 1961 in the case of Obama. But I don't see how this is any more complicated than establishing the other qualifications to be president. Natural born citizen, 35 years old, 14 years resident of the country. And yes, there's going to be a big political kickback. Yes, somebody will try to do other things in the future. We're dealing with the instant case. We're not dealing with what might happen down the road. If that's the case, a long time ago, we would have dealt with the prospect of Donald Trump calling for the overthrow of the government, the murder of his vice president, not moving him to do anything. And that's not how the law works. The law applies after the fact. We have decisions and things that say these are the rules, but application occurs after the fact. We don't say, oh, Mark Thompson, we know you're going to kill somebody on, like the movie Minority Report, on August 7th of next year. We're going to arrest you today. That's not how it works.
I have a question, and that is, if Colorado's ruling today stands with the Supreme Court, we talked a little bit about other states then waiting to see what happens and then following suit. And Mark was saying to me earlier, well, then it'll only be blue states that this happens in. You know, then maybe California will follow suit, but these are all the states that Trump would not have taken anyway. But I wonder if that's really the case. David Katz, I put it to you this way, because anyone can file suit in any state, and then these cases wind through the court process. And so it could be that even in a red state, he gets wiped off the ballot.
Well, the reason that the Colorado case is kind of a jewel is because they gave Trump due process. They had a trial, the court made findings. This is how our due process and how our legal system works. So the people who ran straight to a Supreme Court in a state, or the people who maybe haven't observed the time limits in a state, they may be out. But I believe that if the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, stays its hand, denies cert on this case, of course, only the Colorado law will go into effect because that's state law. But I do think it will embolden people in other states. They will go into swing states if it's still timely for them to do so. They may start doing this in the next few days and follow the Colorado pattern. Ask for a trial, give Trump a chance to defend himself at a trial, afford him due process. And that really would matter in a state like Pennsylvania, in a swing state like that, if they're still timely. So I'm expecting two things to happen, just my sort of political radar, such as it is. Number one, I think there'll be more actions brought in more states, including more swingy states than Colorado. And also, I do think, and I would like to hear from your political expert on this, I think this has to help Nikki Haley. There have to be some people in the Republican Party who not only see her way ahead in the polls, ahead of Biden while it's close with Biden and Trump, but who see here's a candidate, right, who is not under any challenges at all. She's not going to be the defendant in chief. She looks like a commander in chief. And I think that at some point they'll say this is just too risky. This is too risky because he might get thrown off the ballot in one of these states that matters. And with that, we'll go the election. And the Democrats may not want to win ugly, but believe me, the Democrats want to win, whether we think it's a little ugly or not, whether we think it's a little formalistic or not. And again, I don't think it's formalistic. I think this is a good case under the Constitution and under Colorado law. But I think the U.S. Supreme Court, my bet is that they will reverse it anyway.
You know, this is interesting because, Dave, we'll wrap up here. But, guys, I do want to get from Michael Shore what David was talking about. David K. Johnston talks about this, that Trump is, you know, has to show up to court. He's in and out of court between rallies, and that at some point that becomes an encumbrance. I know he's made that point before. Michael, what are the realities concerning Nikki Haley, who is, you know, clean of all of this stuff, and Trump, to David Katz's question?
Well, even in these moments, you're starting to see what and it is a good question. It's one of those things where, you know, I'm not escaping answering it, but it's one of those things that we don't quite know. Vivek Ramaswamy today, in echoing the way that people behave around Donald Trump and the Republican Party, saying that he's outraged by it. He will take himself off the ballot in Colorado if this stands. So there is still, they are all aware that an adherence to Donald Trump and a protection of Donald Trump has political currency, certainly in these early states and certainly with a lot of the Republicans. Again, I've spent a lot of time recently in Iowa, and all of the Republicans there, Trump is over 50%. They're not looking right now at these other people in a serious way, though they should be, because what David Katz just said is true, is that these people are out there now and doing well. Nikki Haley is coming up in the polls, juxtaposed to this mess. They don't want this mess, yet we've been waiting for something to have that change, right? If this is the catalyst for that change, so be it. And I think a lot of people will be happy. But we've been fooled many times before, even with the cumulative difficulties that Donald Trump had, both as a candidate the first time, as a sitting U.S. president, and since. There is nothing that has really disabled him from at least leading that party. And so until it happens, I'm gonna keep betting the favorite here and say that that's not going to happen just yet, not because of this, but some people who bet the underdog do win once in a while, Mark.
David K. Johnston, it's our last minute.
Mark, can I say one last thing for the people who think it's all
then I want to get a prediction from David K. Johnston. Go ahead, David Katz.
For the people who think it's all political and not based on law, if there are 7 Democratic members of the Colorado Supreme Court, 3 of the 7 just dissented and voted in a way that would have helped Trump. And that leads me even more to have confidence in the law in the Colorado Supreme Court, the Colorado system, but I'm dubious about the U.S. Supreme Court. If you want a Katsadamus, the U.S. Supreme Court reverses.
Katsadamus is pretty hot these days, but I want to hear from David K. Johnston also on a prediction. Dave, you think the Supreme Court, you agree with David, will likely overturn this?
Well, Supreme Court will take the case. That's the first thing. And they have to act very quickly. Apparently, the Colorado Secretary of State says that January 5th, she's got to tell the printer go. So they're going to have to act very quickly. I don't know how they're going to rule on this. It's very important that Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, in the Trump subpoena case said the courts are entitled to everybody's justice. You're not above the law. You're not special. But without a doubt, Thomas and Alito are going to argue the political aspects of this. Gorsuch, whose jurisprudence I don't particularly care for, but who seems to me to be a principled man. I just don't like his view of the world, which I find very inhumane in some cases. He very much is in the corner of, we have to uphold laws. And what Trump is effectively arguing here is that the state of Colorado can't exercise its own powers over its electors to determine that someone has made themselves ineligible under the 14th Amendment. That's not a minor issue to address. So I'd be shocked if there's a unanimous decision on this case, but the court being what it is today, probably Trump will prevail at the court.
I want to thank this late night convening of these sagacious creatures. Very, very impressive. It's so good to see you all. Kim, this is to your credit, because you put up the bat beam, and we have all these great guys show up.
There's never been anything like
David
this.
K. Johnston, David Katz, Michael Shore. Thank you, and good night from off the coast of South America, and thank you, Kim.
See ya. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
All right. See you guys.
Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
How about that? That was an all-star Mark Thompson Show panel. Loved it.
Yeah, it was very cool. It was a lot going on, Kim. There was it was the first time I've seen them all in the same place.
Yeah, I know. I loved it. We're going to have to do that again. I'm talking about maybe some type of election night thing or special occasions, right, when a big decision comes down. We'll talk to John Rothman about what happened in Colorado and as well as some other things. But first, let's do a little bit of news before we get to the great John Rothman.
Sounds good.
All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. Former President Trump plans to file an appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court after the GOP frontrunner was banned from Colorado's 2024 presidential ballot. The Democratic-controlled Colorado Supreme Court ruling 4-3 was a party line vote. Trump's involvement in the January 6th of 2021 U.S. Capitol riot was indeed a violation of the 14th Amendment's insurrectionist ban. The former president calling the ruling a completely flawed decision in a statement made today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is questioning why the international community isn't demanding that Hamas lay down its arms and surrender. Blinken saying in an end-of-year news conference that he wants the Israel-Hamas war to end as soon as possible, but added that Israel has a right and obligation to defend itself. He added that the war cannot end with Hamas remaining intact with the capacity to attack Israel again. That according to Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Forecasters say today and tomorrow will likely be the busiest days during a record-setting holiday air travel season. AAA is predicting around 7.5 million air travelers at U.S. airports, breaking the record of 7 million set in 2019. Most of the U.S. should see favorable weather conditions, although rain delays might be possible in Boston, New York, and Atlanta. Of course, here in the Bay Area, we're getting some rain, and that also could affect your flight travel at Bay Area airports. Well, feel free to ask Google any question related to the 2024 elections. You might not get a response, though. Google is restricting the types of election-related questions that its generative AI products will respond to. The tech giant saying it's making the change early next year out of an abundance of caution. There are several New York lawmakers introducing amendments to the Son of Sam law after the wife and children of accused serial killer signed a deal over a new documentary series. Peacock Network is agreeing to pay Asa Alurp and her 2 children upwards of $1 million for a docuseries about Rex Howerman, who's charged in 3 murders and is the prime suspect in a 4th. Lawmakers would like to prevent families of defendants from profiting off of their crimes. Winners have been officially announced for the naming of the Snowplows contest in South Lake Tahoe. The city of South Lake announcing the winners to Monday after almost 2,000 residents cast their votes. 10 snowplows will be named. Here they are: the Big Leplowski, Plowy McPlowface, Scoop Dog, Snowy Wan Kenobi, Darth Blader, Sled Zeppelin, Cleopatra Sleepwood Mac, Austin Powers, and Snowbaka. There's some pretty clever names in there. The full list of names a resident submitted can be seen on the city's website. That's South Lake Tahoe. It has been really festive at Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore, and Santa has been hanging out in the tasting room, sampling the wine, and he gets really generous after he's been sipping the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red? There is still time to get your wines for New Year's, plus you get 10% off. Gotta work for it just a little bit. You call Rich at Tenuta, you say, smash it with your iron rod. Yep,
smash it with your iron rod.
Thank you, ma'am. 925-699-4576, 925-699-4576, the number to call and get your 10% off the whole purchase. A happy holidays from Tenuta Vineyards, and thank you for supporting our sponsor. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked. Well, it is the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you for joining me. I'm Kim McAllister in for Mark Thompson. Mark will be back on January 2nd. So we're together through the new year, but I'm happy to have you along. Very grateful for all the support of the show. I did see something come through that I wanted to say thank you for, and that is Luis, who pops in with what a political all-star team. I know, I'm so proud of it. Michael and the Davids defer compensation. He hopes that they defer compensation the way Ohtani did. Go Dodgers. Oh, did that come out of my mouth?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this segment. Wish Jim Avila could have been here. That would have been perfect as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and thank you to $1 a Day Pinky, who pops in. Oh, it's clicking. With $1 a day. So thank you. Thank you. Your consistent support of the show really, really means the world. So thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm going to bring in a man who really needs no introduction, former KGO talk show host, presidential scholar, and just all around good guy. Here's John Rothman, everybody. Hey. How you doing, John Rothman?
Just great. I love the panel. It was wonderful. I wish everyone could hear it, and I hope that people listen to it, send it out to their friends, and subscribe to the Mark Thompson program.
Thank you very much. Let's start with your opinion on what happened in Colorado.
I agree. Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. Absolutely. No question about it. But I think he should not be barred from the ballot.
Why?
Why? Because the American people have a right to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if he were knocked off the ballot, there would be a martyr complex about him. See, they were out to get me, and they did. Well, I say, let's put it to the people. I think it was very significant, very important that Joe Biden today said he was an insurrectionist. Of course he's an insurrectionist. Does anybody doubt it? And the Colorado court decision states it. And I think that when Mr. Smith's case comes before the court, it too will affirm the fact that Donald Trump tried to subvert the American election of 2020. So I hope he's on the ballot, and I hope he's roundly defeated. Don't make him a martyr. That's my point.
Don't you think, though, that there's a reason that the 14th Amendment and that clause is included in the Constitution, and that we have these laws to protect our democracy? Here we have a democracy at risk from someone who clearly tried to damage it. So
no, he didn't try to damage it. He tried to overthrow it.
Yeah, tried to dismantle it.
Let's get a court conviction. Let's get a criminal case against Donald Trump where he is convicted in a court. That's the way it has to be resolved. It cannot be resolved by taking him off the ballot. It'll only hurt the process of American democracy.
The Constitution protects our democracy. So if we're not going to use it to protect our democracy, then what's the point?
Kim, January 6th proved it's one thing to have words, but you have to have deeds. The January 6th report sums it up. Donald Trump tried to subvert American democracy. Let the courts rule that way. But if you take him off the ballot, millions of Americans who support him and people like me who oppose him will say that's not the way you do it. He has to be repudiated by the American people. If he isn't repudiated by the American people, then he will always claim fraud. They were out to get me, all that stuff. So I agree with the court's bottom line that it was absolute insurrection. But I'm saying he has to be judged by the people, and the people have to make the decision. And the Republican Party, I throw it right back on the Republicans.
So talk to me a little bit about the process for approving an amendment. Is the 14th Amendment, to get an amendment approved is a daunting task, right? It has to go through quite a bit. And so one could argue that the American people already weighed in when this amendment was approved and added to the Constitution.
I don't disagree with that, Kim. I think the 14th Amendment is crystal clear. I think Donald Trump committed insurrection. So let him be charged in a court with insurrection.
But that's not what the amendment says. The amendment doesn't say you have to be found guilty or you have to be this. But in Colorado, a judge did decide with due process, according to David Katz, right? They had a court case. Trump had lawyers in there. And so the judge decided insurrection was committed.
Yes, the Supreme Court essentially on a 4-3 vote made that determination. So let him be charged. Let Donald John Trump be charged with insurrection. By the way, you'll note in the charges brought by Mr. Smith, the words sedition or insurrection are not used.
Yeah.
So look, I don't like Donald Trump. Any man who talks about poisoning the blood of America, which is what he did yesterday, any man who, to my mind, used Hitlerian language, and he's not Hitler, let's be clear, but he used language like what was used in Nazi Germany, is unacceptable as a president. But you cannot make a martyr of Donald Trump. He has to be disqualified by the people. Now, somebody asked in the previous section about Nikki Haley. Where is Nikki Haley? Where is Governor DeSantis? Where are their denunciations of Donald Trump? I'll tell you, they don't want to denounce them because the Republican Party can't win without the Trump supporters.
That's right.
Just that simple. You can't alienate the base. But from the point of view of absolute courage and conviction, Donald Trump committed insurrection and the Republican Party has to repudiate him. Not a court, but The Republican Party itself. And that means the Republican leadership. Where is that deafening silence now? Look, I give a great deal of credit to Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan had the courage to stand up and say what he said the other day about Donald Trump. But that's not enough. It has to be more than that. And the more than that is what's going to happen in Iowa, in South Carolina, and in New Hampshire. New Hampshire and South Carolina in that order. Yeah. These states, these Republicans, good, honorable, decent people, have to understand what Donald Trump is. He will never accept defeat. But we can defeat him if Republicans stand up and just say no. And that has to happen.
I tend to feel a little differently than you, and that is when our democracy is in such peril and when it's at risk, when you have someone like a Trump who would come in and take it down and threaten to stay in office as he did last time, you use every tool you can to make sure that doesn't happen. You protect your country, you protect your democracy,
but
using the tools,
martyr,
using the tools that we've been given.
But I don't want to be a martyr.
14th Amendment.
I don't want him to be a martyr.
Listen, I don't care if he's a martyr as long as he's not in the White House.
No,
good.
You understand. It's not just Donald Trump. It's all of the people who vote for him, all the people who believe in him, all of the people who support him. They have to be shown demonstrably that what Donald Trump did was unconscionable.
It doesn't matter. They're never going to believe it. They're a bunch of crazy people. They're not even going to believe if we all go out to the polls and vote overwhelmingly for President Biden. They're still not going to believe that that election is valid. They're not going to believe anything.
It's okay with me if they don't believe it. It's the American people who have to discredit Donald Trump.
No.
And I believe the Supreme Court, you ask the others, I'll tell you, the Supreme Court will not uphold the conclusion of the Colorado decision because their position will be that let the people decide. That's my decision too. You will not hear a nice word about Donald Trump from me. Never. And I hope he never sits in the White House. But if you're going to purge Donald Trump from the Republican Party, they have to do it themselves.
I saw an argument regarding the Supreme Court and whether or not that they will uphold the 14th Amendment in this case. That if they fail to do that, if they say that it's not applicable here, then they really put the entire Constitution in jeopardy.
No,
and everything's in jeopardy because this is so cut and dried.
With all due respect, I disagree with you. I want you to understand that what the court did was brilliant. The Supreme Court in Colorado said Donald Trump committed insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
That's clear. They're just saying he shouldn't be removed from the ballot. I want the Supreme Court of the United States to weigh in.
No, that the Colorado Supreme Court said he should be removed from the ballot.
I know. I don't agree with that, though. I'm telling you, he committed insurrection.
Right.
It shouldn't be a court judgment. Now, I also am very pragmatic politically. Why do the Republicans, who know what Donald Trump did, why are they silent? Because they know that for the Republican Party to win, they can't alienate the Trump base.
Yeah.
So let the Republicans know clearly and precisely that he committed insurrection. And I'm waiting for Mr. Smith's cases to come to court where what Donald Trump did, even if you don't use the term insurrection or sedition, Donald Trump tried to subvert an election. That's what we learned in Georgia. That's what we've learned in case after case. And I would remind you, Rudy Giuliani, who was the major advocate for the Donald Trump position, is now, well, it's a tragedy, an American tragedy. Let the tragedy unfold. Let Trump be denied the presidency, and I hope the nomination, by a Republican Party that comes to its senses. I understand that we use every tool in the box, but using the idea that a major contender, who by all polls is the majority choice of the Republican Party for the nomination of their party for the presidency, he has to be removed by them. Otherwise, I said it before, he becomes a martyr. The Republican Party will say, there's no justice in this country. Well, let Donald Trump be brought before the bar of justice. I say, let him be convicted, as he will be, of trying to subvert the election of 2020. Let that happen. And that's what people aren't talking about, the Smith case, the case that is coming up and will be heard in January. That's the critical case. in my mind in dealing with Donald Trump. But let me just say personally, the fact that he talks about poisoning the blood of America, I would challenge anyone who is listening to the sound of my voice. Unless you're a Native American, we are all children of immigrants, all of us, whether we are black or white, whether we came from Poland or Germany or European countries, or whether we came from China or Japan or anywhere in the world. This idea of poisoning the blood, I was shocked, Kim. Donald Trump said, "Oh, I've never read Mein Kampf." Let me tell you, his first wife, look it up. It's right there on the internet. His first wife reported that Donald Trump had a book at his bedside called My New Order, published in 1942. I have a copy of that book. It recounts all of this blood-curdling stuff, including purity of blood and all the rest of that nonsense. And according to his first wife, he read that book thoroughly. Donald Trump is not only dishonest.
And here's a guy who doesn't even read, but he read that.
No. I know it's fun to say he doesn't read. He reads. I think he's a selective reader. Yeah. But let me be crystal clear about this. There should be indignation about a man who served in the presidency of the United States and who seeks to be president again, who would talk about poisoning the blood of America. Anyone who is the son or daughter of an immigrant should rise up and say, "You have no business in the White House. You are a racist. You are a bigot." Yeah. And I think that has to be the indictment. I understand. We'll see what the Supreme Court does. I don't believe the Supreme Court will rule that he should be kept off the ballot.
Let's talk about the vile language that Trump has used of late. He invoked the term vermin. He talked about poisoning the blood of America with immigrants. And we do know from his now late and previous wife that he did have a copy of Mein Kampf by his bedside.
It's a book called My New Order, and it was seated by his bedside. I have a copy in my library. And it was not Mein Kampf, but it is a collection of Hitler's speeches going through 1942.
So having this book doesn't necessarily mean that you're some type of, Hitlerian disciple. It means that maybe you're a student of history. But then he comes and he brings this language. Do you think that he saw what happened with Hitler's rise to power and how people responded to that, and he's taking a page from Hitler and doing it on purpose?
It's a combination of Hitlerian rhetoric, but also Roy Cohn, who was the family lawyer and who was Joe McCarthy's right hand in the Senate, who said, "Never admit defeat, just keep blasting back. If they accuse you, you accuse them. If they say you're undemocratic, you accuse Joe Biden of being undemocratic." Yeah. I understand his thought and philosophy, but we have to understand. I don't speak here as a Democrat, as a Republican, as a liberal, as a conservative. I'm speaking to you as an American, as somebody who believes in the American system, my father was a refugee from Nazi Germany. Yeah. My great-grandparents were refugees who came here in the 1850s. And I understand what it means to flee oppression. I understand what it means to have a home, a sanctuary. And what Donald Trump has done is to violate the very principles of America and what we stand for. And there should be no mistake. I don't hold Donald Trump accountable per se. The Republican Party. Can you imagine a Republican Party, people like Ron DeSantis, like Nikki Haley, who are not denouncing Donald Trump for these rhetorical excesses? There's an old saying, Kim, if they say they're going to kill you, believe them. And I believe Donald Trump would kill the American democratic system if he could. Yeah. The fact that he can quote Vladimir Putin, the fact that he quotes Viktor Orban, the fact that the people he relies on are the dictators. He doesn't quote Jefferson. He doesn't quote Jackson. He doesn't quote Washington. He doesn't quote Lincoln. He chooses these kinds of petty dictators. And that is the danger. So I don't know what will happen on this case. The Supreme Court could decide virtually any way. But we have to understand, keep your eye on the ball. Preventing this man from being president of the United States of America must be the mission of everyone who loves our country.
There have been calls, mostly from Democrats, to pressure Justice Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from this key January 6th case, the case of whether or not Trump had presidential immunity and whether that applies in the current cases he faces. Senator Richard Blumenthal, who's a Democrat from Connecticut, wants Thomas to recuse himself. He says, especially because of Thomas's wife, Ginny, to challenge the 2020 election. And so he sent a letter to the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts to take appropriate steps to ensure that Thomas recuses himself from this case. Do you see, or do you foresee Thomas stepping down, or do you think this is just kind of hot air and there's no way he's going to leave this one?
No, your key words were absolutely spot on. He has to recuse himself.
Yeah.
The most important lesson in that was Bill Rehnquist, who I knew pretty well. Bill Rehnquist was an associate justice of the United States Supreme Court. He had worked in the Nixon Justice Department. He was nominated for the Supreme Court, placed on the court. When it came to the issue of the United States versus Richard Nixon, the critical case in the Nixon case, he recused himself. Bill Ruckelshaus said, Justice Rehnquist said, I cannot vote on this because these are all my friends. Yeah. I believe Clarence Thomas should follow the precedent set by Chief Justice Rehnquist in recusing himself, but no one can force him to recuse himself. He must recuse himself. That's it. And will he? I doubt it. Clarence Thomas is one of the most unethical, dishonest people to ever sit on the United States Supreme Court.
It's an embarrassment.
Yeah, it is. And may I say that when he was nominated by George H.W. Bush, I did everything I could to oppose his nomination because I believed he was the wrong person at the wrong time. So who knows? You know what was sad about that? He was the second black man to be put on the Supreme Court. He succeeded to the seat that was held by one of the greatest justices in the history of our country, and who was a champion of civil rights. And he has succeeded. Thurgood Marshall was succeeded by somebody like Clarence Thomas. It's sad. It's a disgrace. But he does sit on the court. He does have a responsibility, and we will see what happens. By the way, I mentioned earlier in talking about Watergate, there were good Republicans, people of real stature, who understood what was happening and resigned their office. They wouldn't. Bill Ruckelshaus, who I mentioned earlier, and I mentioned him intentionally, and it's a good way to explain it. He left. He would not fire Archibald Cox.
Yeah.
And so I think this is something that we have to expect, that these leaders have to have conscience. I don't think Clarence Thomas will do the right thing. I hate to say it. He has no conscience in my mind. He feels, and I'm saying this for his benefit, that in defending Donald Trump, he is defending his vision of America and his wife's vision of America.
That's why, their vision of America is how much money can I get for myself? That's their vision.
The thing is, take a look at his voting record. Take a look at the way he's done it. We need people of real conscience, people like Bill Rehnquist, people like Ruckelshaus, people like, frankly, Archibald Cox. We need people who have courage and conviction. And in the Republican Party, there may be a lot of profile, but there's very little courage.
Can I ask you about this case out of Arlington Cemetery? It's one of these cases where they're trying to remove a monument. It's a Confederate monument at Arlington Cemetery. For a moment, a judge blocked the monument from being removed. It's a century-old memorial there to Confederate soldiers. And now they're saying you can go ahead and remove this, that there's not going to be any desecration of graves. The grasses won't be disturbed. And so the injunction is lifted and this monument is being taken down. I feel like there's a time and place for these monuments. And when you're at a place, at a cemetery or a place of history, that it's good to have them to remember. Do you think that they should take this monument down, or do you agree that, or do you think that it should stand?
First of all, I'm a student of the Confederacy. One of my treasured volumes is Jefferson Davis, Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government. He was president of the Confederacy. And Alexander H. Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, who wrote a book on the Great Rebellion. I studied the Civil War. I have a whole library within my library on the Confederacy. I must tell you, I do not believe the monument should be taken down. It was placed there in part by Union people, by people who fought in the Civil War, not because they agreed with the Confederacy, but because we were trying to bind up the nation's wounds. We were trying to acknowledge that although they lost the war, they were still Americans. And one of the things that's very important to point out, ex-Confederates were reintegrated into America. Many of them served in the House and in the Senate. This question of revising history, whether it's erasing murals or removing monuments, I find offensive. I would rather, and it's interesting, when we were down in New Orleans, I took my older son Samuel to the Confederate Museum. It's a very small museum run by a private family. And we walked through it, and he had a chance to see it. And I explained to him, I brought you here not so you could agree with them, but so you could see them. You've got the picture up of Stone Mountain in Georgia. People ask, should Stone Mountain be removed? Of course not. The fact that it portrays Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson, we have to learn from history. So I have no problem at all with a memorial for those who died in the Civil War. After all, it was the American Civil War.
Right.
It wasn't a foreign Civil War. And so, to be honest with you, and I know a lot of people listening to the sound of my voice will disagree with me, I believe it's very important to remember history.
Yep.
As I say, in my library, I have books on the Confederacy, not because I agreed with them, but because we have to understand them. Robert E. Lee was a great patriot. And do you know what he did after the war? He helped heal the nation's wounds. He traveled the country calling for reconciliation. And I would point out to you that one of the most remarkable stories was Ulysses S. Grant's wife and the wife of Jefferson Davis, who struck up a friendship. They were on opposite sides in the war, but they both wanted the nation to heal. It doesn't mean you defend the Confederacy, but it means you understand the Confederacy. Somebody asked me the same thing. How would I feel about a Hitler memorial? And of course, I'm against it, but I'm in favor of Holocaust memorials. I'm in favor of memorials that tell the story of Nazi Germany. I have no problem people understanding and reading what happened in those dark and terrible days. And in Germany, they teach about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
They teach about what Hitler was. I don't want to erase history. And many of you will recall I was very involved in the battle to preserve the murals at George Washington High School, which depict slavery and which many people wanted to see erased. Let me be Native Americans. There's a dead Indian in the mural, and people asked me about erasing them. I said, no. The man who created those murals, Arnatoff, was a Marxist. He created it in 1936. You know why he did it? To show what had really happened. You don't erase history. You learn from history. And so I am very much opposed to removing that kind of Confederate memorial, particularly from Arlington Cemetery. We were all Americans. That's what the Civil War was about, to preserve the nation. And as Abraham Lincoln said, to bind up the nation's wounds.
So
that's very important.
There's a difference to me, though, between removing a name from a base, a Confederate soldier's name from a base, right? And this is why the removal of names from military bases is involved in why the Arlington statue is being removed as well. So this was a statue that was unveiled in 1914. It features this bronze woman crowned with olive leaves. She's standing on a 32-foot pedestal. She's holding a laurel wreath, a plow stalk, and a pruning hook. And an inscription says, "They have beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks." There's some other
which is from the book of Isaiah.
Yes, it's a biblical inscription. There's some other things on this. There's a statue that has a kind of a figure on the side of the statue that includes a black woman, an enslaved man following his owner to war. So Save Southern Heritage Florida filed multiple lawsuits trying to keep this in place. They say it was built to promote reconciliation between the North and the South. But others say, no, this statue depicts a slave running after his master as he walks down the road. There's nothing reconciliatory about that. And this is being removed in conjunction with the review of army bases with Confederate names. So I feel like we need to really look at each individual thing that's being removed or being changed.
I agree.
Maybe it makes sense to take the names off of military bases. Maybe that's outlived its usefulness and we don't need to reconcile that anymore.
Let's take names off schools, right? Here in San Francisco, we filed a lawsuit because Paul Scott did it and we won. They wanted to change the names of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Why? Yeah. They were racists. Well, you're right. There were racist tendencies, but it is absolutely ridiculous to try to erase it. I always tell people, read Abraham Lincoln, September 18th, 1858, the fourth debate between Lincoln and Douglas at Charleston, Illinois, in which Lincoln talks about the fact that white people are superior to black people. There shouldn't be intermarriage between white and black people, that black people shouldn't vote. Do you judge Lincoln by that statement, which all of you can Google? Or do you judge him by his record as president, the great emancipator, the man who brought about, frankly, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution? I'm not interested in selective history. I'm interested in learning history. Yesterday, we witnessed the funeral of Sandra Day O'Connor. Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court. When she retired from the court, she created an organization to deal with civics, learning about America, because she said there is an abysmal ignorance about American history. It's absolutely true. It is astounding to me when people speak about erasing names or removing names like Lincoln or Washington or Jefferson. They don't understand the full range of history. I applaud, by the way, that there is a Confederate museum in New Orleans. I want people to walk in and understand what that was. And as to the statues, well, I made the recommendation they take those statues and put them in a Confederate statuary hall, if you will, so people can see them. I just find it reprehensible that we try to erase history in this fashion. And by the way, the Confederate soldiers who died battling for their Confederacy, Robert E. Lee battled for Virginia. He considered himself a Virginian first. And did he have slaves? You bet he did. But was he the commandant at West Point? Was he one of the most brilliant American generals? Yes. And so, you have to weigh and balance these things. But if you're going to teach history, and if I had not been a radio talk show host, I would have liked to have been a teacher of history. Because when you learn history, one other quick point. I believe in debating issues. Those of you who listened to me all those years on KGO, I invited people who disagreed with me. That's what made it interesting. So I was once invited to teach a speech class at a local middle school. And I wanted the kids to understand that you can have two sides to every issue. So what was the issue I chose? Resolved that chocolate cake should be eaten every day. Now, the idea was that chocolate cake was good for you. And I had half the class debating that it was, half the class debating that it wasn't. And then, in the middle of the debate, I clapped my hands and they flipped sides.
Yep.
Why? Because I want people to understand. For those of you who used to listen to me on KGO, some of you said, you're too nice to the Trump people. I wasn't nice to them. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves. And I believe very strongly that airing issues, debating issues, really getting into the issues of the day is so important. And that's why when you ask me about the Confederacy, When you read Jefferson Davis, when you read Alexander Stephens, when you read Judah P. Benjamin, one of the great American statesmen, when you read these people who supported the Confederacy, you have to understand their logic was wrong. What they were defending was incomprehensible. I would have been in the Union cause from day one. But let me tell you, you talked about Trump at the very beginning. That's why I support our system. I believe that when you expose evil, and Donald Trump is evil, when you expose evil to the bright sunlight of freedom, then it is exposed, and you have to believe that people ultimately come to their senses. Certainly, we believe that in Germany. We believe it in Japan. That's what denazification was all about. And I would point out to you that Germany and Japan became model democracies after descending into the depths of dictatorship and, yes, idol worship. So
we're almost out of time, but I know, but I wanted to throw this one last issue at you, and that is that the House has adjourned for winter holiday. They won't be back till January 9th. They've left behind all of these issues for Congress to take up as soon as they come back: domestic issues, international issues, aid to Ukraine, border crisis, everything else. It's being called an absolute mess. Is there any way anything gets done even when they get back into session?
First of all, January 9th is Richard Nixon's birthday. Everybody should understand that and celebrate appropriately.
No.
It's a disgrace that Congress would take a recess when we face such remarkable issues. The fact that the Congress, the House of Representatives, is tied up in knots is because of the Republicans. And by the way, the new Speaker of the House of Representatives is beyond words. He's against everything we believe in, opposed to gay marriage, opposed to equal rights for women when it comes to abortion rights, the right of a woman to control her own body. The man is completely unfit ideologically to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. He was chosen as a compromise, but I just read an introduction to a book that he wrote. All I can tell you, Kim, is I'm ashamed when you consider the history of speakers of the House of Representatives, some of whom have been, I'll grant you, charlatans and fools, but most of them have been brilliant beyond words. And I always like to think of the House as the people's house, which is what it is. Yep. This House of Representatives, because of the Republicans, because of the so-called Freedom Caucus, is the antithesis. So I'm glad you raised it, Kim. Very few people think about the fact that Congress leaves the city of Washington in the midst of grave crises. It's a shame.
Sure does. John Rothman, thank you so much for being on the Mark Thompson Show. Your podcast is called Around the Political World with John Rothman, and you can find that on all various podcast platforms. What is it, 10, 15 minutes every morning?
It is 10 minutes every morning, Monday through Friday. We have had 100,000 downloads.
So cool.
We continue to grow and expand. And my only regret, Kim, is I wish you and I, were back on the radio so there could be more interaction. But I welcome comments, which I receive regularly, and I appreciate everyone's support. And let me just indicate again, if you have a chance to re-listen to the first half hour of the Mark Thompson program dealing with what happened in Colorado, you should, and you should make sure your friends hear it. It was a spectacular demonstration of bringing together fine scholars. And you, Kim, were responsible for this particular moment in time.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you. And we're going to be together again for Nikki Maduro at 9:00 on Friday.
On Friday, so I'll see you then. All right.
Send me the link. Send me the link.
I'll send you the link.
All right, guys. Thank you.
John Rothman, everybody. All right, let's do a touch of news, and then we'll get into an interview that Mark did with Maria Baltazzi talking about ways to find happiness. She kind of guides us to the best path that we can find happiness for ourselves. A very interesting interview. We'll get to it in just a moment. But first, a little bit of news. Let's do it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Former President Trump says the decision of the Democratic-controlled Colorado Supreme Court to ban him from the state's 2024 presidential ballot is completely flawed. A 4-3 party line vote, the court said yesterday that Trump violated the 14th Amendment's insurrectionist ban on January 6th of 2021, when he encouraged the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Trump had earlier won similar cases in Michigan and Minnesota, and he will be on the ballot in those states. The war between Israel and Hamas continues. The political leader of Hamas in Cairo today, talking with Egyptian leaders about the Israeli hostages and the potential for a second ceasefire. The Israeli president saying the country is willing to engage in talks for another humanitarian pause as well. U.S. Park Police say the Lincoln Memorial was found vandalized this morning. Officials say the phrase "Free Gaza" was written in several places with red paint. Steps and the ground were also splattered with red paint. We're talking about the Lincoln Memorial, something incredibly important to our nation's history. And I don't care what political point you want to make, to vandalize that is horrible. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's hold on military promotions is officially over. The Senate confirming 11 top military nominees yesterday after Tuberville agreed to end his blockade following pressure from his own party. The Alabama Republican had blocked all military promotions since February in protest of the Pentagon's abortion policy that allows service members travel reimbursement for abortion care. President Biden is in Milwaukee. He's highlighting his administration's effort to support Black-owned businesses. The president visited the Milwaukee Black Chamber of Commerce today, discussing how Black business ownership is growing at the fastest pace in decades. President Biden also met with the owner of a Black-owned business that is removing lead pipes in the city to help meet the administration's goal of replacing all lead lines across the country. So that's pretty cool. The United States and Venezuela have reportedly agreed to a prisoner exchange. Reports say Venezuela has agreed to release 36 people, including at least 8 Americans, in exchange for a close ally of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. CBS News reports some of the Americans who will be released have been designated as wrongly detained by the State Department. Want to tell you also about the Powerball jackpot. It's now at $572 million ahead of tonight's drawing. The total climbed when no tickets matched Monday's $542 million drawing. If somebody wins tonight, they would either take a $286 million lump sum or get yearly payments. So, little holiday dream for us. This report, again, is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee.com. The holiday blend coffee, which Mark loves so much he packed in his suitcase and took on the cruise, is still available at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I love the teas, and it's just about $9 or so for a bag of tea. It usually lasts me more than a month. At least that's what it seems like. So a pretty long time. Perfect to give as a gift as well. You get 10% off at checkout. So when you go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com and you're at checkout, enter Mark T all together, Mark T at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com to get your exclusive 10% off. An interview now with Maria Baltazzi and Mark Thompson. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
My wife wants some vegetables for coup d'etat. I was a basketball referee.
Feels great, baby.
Use Mark Thompson. It's unbelievably offensive.
What he's got going here is a situation.
I was fortunate. Everyone I worked with made me better at my job.
You are a cover-up artist and you are a liar.
It is so cool to be able to welcome into our crew someone who we had a brief conversation with her once before, but the kind of technical issues and stuff. And I said, just come back and we'll do it the way it should be done, because her new book is really cool. It's called Take a Shot at Happiness, Write, Direct, and Produce the Life You Want. She is herself a producer, a director, been involved in so many projects. She's a PhD. She's one of the most accomplished people I know. Maria Baltazzi, everyone. Hi, Maria.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, we're excited that you're here. I saw you on The Talk, which is like The View for CBS, I think, right?
Yes. Yes.
What was that like? Who's on that show? Is that Julie Chen or who runs it?
She used to be, no longer. So the moderator is Natalie Morales, and I also spoke with Cheryl Underwood.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And were they receptive to your concepts?
They were so receptive and so welcoming. They made me feel comfortable. Everybody at the talk was just incredibly supportive. They were curious to hear about my book. They want to read my book. It was a fantastic experience.
Oh, wow.
Really,
Good.
really great. Right. And as it turned out, I actually knew the director. We had worked together years ago on another show.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I do want to get into the book, and I have read the book, and I really enjoyed it. And there are all kinds of cool things I want to follow up with you on. But you do come out of these interesting foundational backgrounds that are associated with television, meaning that, I think you went to cinema school or you went to film school, and you've produced, you've been a producer on huge shows like Survivor and, a lot of these shows that involve sort of adventure,
Right.
And you reference that in your book. There's some great stuff, and I'll get to that in a second. But let me just ask you first, because this came up the last time you visited. The stuff we see on Survivor and some of these other sort of adventure-related, now that's a reality game, meaning there's somebody eliminated every week and there's a prize at the end. But the reality also during that reality game is that people are put under incredible duress and stress. Yeah. That's all real, right?
That is all real. 100%.
So the outcome is not manipulated in any way?
It can't be, because you are vying for $1 million. So you cannot tamper with somebody else's game. You have to even be cognizant of how you are asking questions, because if you are asking leading questions, then you could be accused of tampering with somebody's game. So you, as a producer, at least when I was doing the show, I was very aware of what I said and how I said it. So even where I stood on the beach, covering story, is that I never wanted to be in a position where a contestant would come back to me and said, you affected my game.
Sure. So especially in these shows where there are alliances that you have to build and this sort of thing, you don't want to be ever accused of, having suggested an alliance or something, I love the psychological part of Survivor, but you also, and you point to this in your book, there's some incredible challenges and they involve endurance. And this is where, you do this thing in this book, which is designed to give us all, I think, empower us all to other sorts of moments of happiness and transformational aspects to finding happiness in our own lives. Even if we feel ourselves generally happy, there are always ways that you can get more out of life. And one of the things that you, I remember an anecdote in the book. So a lot of the book is based on research, and then you'll throw in some anecdotes, and it's almost got a workshop feel because you ask the reader to take snapshots of their life and of various things. And you can expand on any of this. But the thing I wanted to mention was this incredible anecdote that I wish you would relate to everyone. The one I'm thinking of is an endurance related anecdote. It comes off the set of Survivor. You were there, and the people on Survivor, they're just decimated. I mean, they're famished. They're weakened by all the days out there, by exposure, and then they're put through some kind of endurance test. And I wonder if you can relate to everyone that specific beat in Survivor and how it opened the door to realization on your part.
Well, that is actually one of my very favorite Survivor stories, because it was such a defining moment for me. And it was season 2 in Australia. The two tribes had become one. And it was a day when it was so hot and they had no energy whatsoever. And they had to go to a challenge. And they thought that they found out that the challenge was a physical challenge, an endurance challenge. And knowing how fatigued and hungry and tired they were, I thought, oh, well, this is going to be over in a heartbeat. Except the reward was for hot dogs, hamburgers, and sleeping in a warm cot that night. So there was huge motivation to do this challenge. And it went on and on and on until almost nightfall, when we finally have a winner. They go off to have their food reward, and I return to the camp with the contestants, only to find out that the tent that they had built in a dry riverbed had been hit by a flash flood. And everything, almost everything, was just washed away. And the contestants, seeing this sight and being hot and hungry and tired, and it's almost nightfall, it broke them. And they collapsed into the sand and they huddled up next to each other for warmth. And one of the contestants, Elizabeth Hasselbeck,
sure,
said, do you know what day it is? It's Thanksgiving. And I promise you the game stopped. You could feel a notable shift. And spontaneously, they each took their turn saying what they were grateful for. I'm grateful that I have a fishing hook. I just found it. I'm grateful that I brought a fleece with me to the challenge because now I have something warm. I'm grateful that we have each other in this moment. And I think about this every year at Thanksgiving in particular, because it just reminds me that you could have almost everything taken away from you. You can have very little, but yet still find something to be grateful for. And that was such a huge lesson for me. And when you think about, well, you know, it's a game, it's a controlled environment, but for them in that moment, that was very real to them. And it was one of the most touching moments in the 7 seasons that I did Survivor. That is the most touching, profound moment that I experienced with them, you know, because you take it out into real life and you see, you know, hurricanes, you see earthquakes, you see floods, and you see these families that are crying, and you know there's devastation behind them, but yet they're crying and saying, "I'm so grateful because we still have, you know, our family, we still have our friends," and it's such a beautiful lesson.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think most of the time, most of us are not enduring those cataclysmic events that you describe. It's nonetheless something that you point to in your book. You spent a lot of time on this, actually. It was interesting to me. It was sort of a repetitive theme, I thought, on gratitude and, you know, the grace that can be in your life, you know. And you, I think, have an experience, but it's not in the book, and I appreciated that it wasn't, that can be underpinned by faith, because there are many who, you know, don't have some kind of organized faith that they ascribe to. It can be, you have it within yourself, and a connectivity I think all of us have to the world around us. I mean, and I think you reflect some of these themes in your book. And but that gratefulness, that the notion of being grateful, is something that you really emphasize in the journey to achieve even greater happiness, you know.
Because it's that important. And the German philosopher Meister Eckhart.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. If he has a saying, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's if the only thing you ever say, the only prayer you ever say is thank you, that will be enough.
Yeah. Because go ahead. please.
Yeah, no, I just think gratitude. It also gives you hope. You know, when you can feel grateful for not having very much, there's hope in that. Yeah, and one of my teachers, Dr. Tal Ben Shahar, says the definition of depression is sadness without hope.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I always felt as though depression, I mean, frankly, depression is an interesting thing because there can be psychological and chemical imbalances, even psychologically, that can affect it. But let's leave that aside for now. I always feel as though getting too lost in a narrative, you lose perspective. And one of the things that gratefulness, or, you know, this notion of being thankful does is it kind of regrounds you and can reframe a lot of your world so that you don't get so caught up in the stuff that's not going well. You also are able to shed light on those things that you are grateful for. You know, it may literally be the fact that you have life and that you can connect with the life around you. I thought it was a really interesting thing that you really emphasized in your book. The book is sort of, as I say, it's kind of like a workbook. You know, it reminded me of some of the books out of the world of academics in my past, you know, where where you're called upon sort of to do certain things to move to the various levels.
Right. And that was very intentional. Yeah, I created the book that I wished I would have had early in my journey. And it's as you're pointing out, it's a combination book and workbook. And what I do is I write about the happiness essentials, like having faith and love and gratitude and forgiveness, those ideas. And then I ask readers to take their cell phones and take images and then journal about them. And doing this takes the intellectual ideas that you are reading about for happiness and makes those intellectual happiness ideas now hard ideas. You embody them in a way that is specific to you. It's not what some book is saying, well, this is what love is and it's supposed to make you happy. By doing that intentional focus on love as it relates to your happiness, it makes it more specific to you and I think relatable.
Yeah, I think that it's a great way to immediately put you in the game. You know what I mean? In addition to reading about the game, now you're in the game. I thought it was a clever notion. Your world as a producer. You know, you have a background. Many of our viewers and listeners are out of San Francisco in the Bay Area in Northern California, and you have a history in that area also. We met years ago at KRON. It was NBC at that time, Channel 4. Have you been back up that way? Have you seen, the new Channel 4, the one that's been around now for a while? They're not NBC anymore.
No. I have not been up to the Bay Area in many, many years. The last time I was up there, it was still KRON.
Oh, wow.
It was still an NBC affiliate. So when I did go back, the last time that I did go back to the Bay Area was in Mill Valley. So I didn't actually go into the city. So it's been a while since I've been on Van Ness.
Yeah, I think they've torn down the building or something, haven't they, Kim? They tear down KRON, or they did some work on it or something. That hospital, the Zuckerberg General or whatever, I think that's next door. That Jack Tar Hotel isn't there anymore. I think it's a hospital now. Isn't that right, Kim? I believe that's it. Anyway, it's you come out of the creative arts, and you were doing the creative arts then, and you then just had this burgeoning career as a producer. And I feel as though now you've sort of returned to your calling. As you say, you're very highly educated in this area. Has there been a reception that you're happy with? Have people sparked to? I know you've done a number of these, in addition to the book, a number of these kinds of workshops on a practical level in person, I think, with people. Give me a sense of what the general sense of receptivity is toward your work.
I have heard so many times, and this includes the editor of my book. This book arrived at a time when I really needed it. So whether it's somebody that has taken a course from me, whether it's somebody who is at my publisher that's reading my book, proofreading it, or somebody that has read my book as a review, that is a consistent statement that has come back to me that I needed this book. It just landed at the right time.
Well, I think that many of us isolate obstacles in our lives from the rest of our life. And oftentimes the connections are there, but we're just overlooking them. We see it as an obstacle, an impediment, when it's actually part of a way we think, Right. So the book is Take a Shot at Happiness, Write, Direct, and Produce the Life You Want. And it's available wherever books are sold. Congratulations on it. I'm really excited, that you have another area of creativity that you've excelled in. You're an Emmy winner, and as I say, you produced all these many hours of television. It's really cool that you can get this going. Yeah. Well,
what my hope is that I am I'm inspiring people to become what I am, and that's a happiness explorer, someone who seeks to better understand themselves and what makes them happier. And when you do this consistently, which is what my book does, it guides you to look for positive moments throughout your daily life. And when you do this, and you do this on a consistent basis, you're creating a positive neural pathway towards the good. And then that eventually becomes your habit and reshapes your well-being.
Yeah, you talk about happiness and resilience as the same thing.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that real quick?
Yes. I feel that if you learn the virtues, qualities, and habits of happy people, which is what my book is all about, is that you have these tools, you have a way of recognizing, I think, sooner when you are going down a negative path. You now have the emotional tools to navigate those challenges and work through them quicker, and then get to the other side being more emotionally intact, which I think is huge. And I say this because this is how my life has gone. My life is a 180 from where I started.
Why do you say that? In what way?
Well, I was at a place when I made the choice to go on my journey. I was at a place in my life where I felt nothing was working. I felt my career wasn't where I wanted it to be. My personal life certainly wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I remember sitting in my Los Angeles office saying, this is not going to be a moment in my life that defines me. I'm not staying here. And I made the choice. I wanted to be happier and started to take action. And eventually I wrote a book. And that's what it is. So often I get asked, what is the key to happiness? And while there's many answers to that question, I think the real key to happiness is choice backed by action. So you have to first want to and really understand what that means when you say, I choose happiness, because it's almost like it's a vow that you take every day. It's a choice that you make every day. And most of the time throughout the day. And sometimes, admittedly, it's easier than other times. But then you have to do something about it. You can't just say, oh, I want to be happy and sit on a couch. You need to go out there and you need to do the work. And it's a lot of work, but it's once you start seeing the benefits of it, it's the only way you want to be.
Yeah.
At least that's
and it's a way of thinking, is what I got from your book. I mean, I didn't see it as a lot of work necessarily, but I get what you're saying. I mean, that you have to apply yourself for sure. Again, it's Take a Shot at Happiness, Maria Baltazzi's latest. And please come back and visit again. Always great to talk to you, and it's a good sort of end of year conversation to have. So at minimum, I'd love to have it annually. But really cool. Congratulations on the reception, clearly on all the publicity, and really a pleasure to have you in on the show.
Thank you. It's always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Maria Baltazzi, everybody. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I just want a little Christmas music in the background.
What the hell kind of Christmas music is that?
This is perfect Christmas music. What do you mean?
That's not.
Listen.
That's not Christmas music.
It's sure. What are you talking about?
No.
It's perfect.
Can we try something else?
You know what
maybe?
You know what that's called, Kim? Maybe it's and you have a musical family. Julia is a talented musical person, but this is called staccato. What they're doing right now.
Is that what that is?
Kim, how are you?
Yes. You hear that? Yeah. You don't like it?
No. Can we do something else?
Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This is just like you.
I'm not feeling
block
it.
People from there. All right, let's try. You want something more upbeat?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let me get you a more like. Let me get you a rock and roll kind of thing. Is that what you want? A rock and roll thing?
Yeah. Let's upbeat. Let's get some upbeat.
You like that?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Kim, how are you?
All right. Now, Kim.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't love it either. I don't
You're not
love
feeling
that.
it? Okay.
No, I'm not. Hold on a second. Stop.
What else you got?
Stop. How about the Now that I love, baby. Yeah.
I'm in a wood-paneled room.
Christmas, everybody.
Drinking some hot buttered rum at the holiday party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's having a sweet holiday season. I know there's a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes it's a kind of a downer, but hope that we can lift your spirits here, give you some information along the way. Yeah.
I'd be willing to bet my lunch
Kim
that there's
doesn't
alcohol
seem like she's
involved.
loving. How about this one, Kim? It's a Disney adventure.
It's a
Santa
Hallmark holiday
may not be
special.
able to make it this year. Who's going to deliver all of Santa's magic? On a special night, bring the whole family.
Starring Dean Cain and Nicolette Sheridan. Yes.
What about rock and roll, baby? There's a rockin'. Yeah.
Get on your Harley and head for a holiday cocktail.
Santa's coming with all his body ink and piercings. This year, it's a rock and roll Santa. I really don't love that. How about this? It's kind of a. It says.
Got a good beat. I'll take
feels
it.
kind of Mariah Carey intro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little too formulaic.
Here she comes
for
in her
me.
red dress.
Oh, there you go.
What is that? A very ZZ Top Christmas?
Yeah. This Christmas, drop the hammer. Santa's coming, and he's playing the riffs. Wow, man, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of good music out there.
How about
Unfortunately, we haven't heard any of it today.
Wow. It's a tough room. You got to admit, it's a tough room.
Yeah.
This is called Beautiful Wonderland. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, we already heard that. That was the
I could
that was
take
the
that.
Hallmark
We
thing.
could leave that. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the.
What else do you have in the Mark Thompson studio?
No, I don't know. I mean, just look. I got a lot of Christmas stuff. I love Christmas music. So I could hit you with a little bit of that.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, this is kind of cool.
It's kind of Mannheim Steamroller-esque.
Someone did this to spoil our Christmas.
All right. That's good. That's good.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Anything else?
Well, you know me. I love the blues. It's a bluesy Christmas season, baby. Christmas in the Lounge, Kim.
In
Kim,
the
how are
United
you?
Lounge? Yeah, the United VIP Lounge. I'm sorry, sir. Your flight's been delayed.
Oh, my gosh. Or there's this. This is the Christmas parade. Oh, this, again, sounds like a Hallmark movie. Right?
Yeah, it really does.
This holiday season, bring the whole family for a magical adventure. Oh, man. All your favorite characters are back, and they're bringing you a warm holiday season. Oh, my gosh. I don't know.
I'd watch that movie.
Okay. This isn't bad. Nah, I don't know, Kim. Well, I this has been fun, but I
Yeah.
don't think we ever really did find the
right one. This
the one
isn't
that you-
isn't bad. We'll take it.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody have a happy holiday.
Happy
And
holidays, everybody.
all of us on the show, we love you and we thank you for your support.
Happy holidays, Mark Thompson.
You too, Kim McAllister. Thank you for everything.
It's fantastic.
Kim McAllister in for Mark Thompson. Do want to see if we can't shove in a little bit of law and disorder if we can. What do you think, Albert? Was that all right?
Yeah, I think we have enough time, and
Right
I think I'm filling enough time to find the production element. I'm ready.
Let's get it done. Law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
Pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care.
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Let's get right to it. While 3 men were robbing a store in Colorado, another random thief stole their getaway car. Yes, it sounds like maybe it was a TV show, right? But no, it actually happened. Colorado authorities say an actual robber on thief crime took place over the weekend. This happened in Commerce City, which is a suburb of Denver. 3 masked suspects allegedly robbed the high-low check cashing just before 11 a.m. As the 3 tried to make their way to their getaway car, they ran into a bit of a twist, one could say. Their ride had been swiped. Authorities suspect the getaway car was already stolen by the check cashing robbery trio, so that made for the second theft of this car. 2 of the check cashing robbery suspects were arrested. The third, as well as the suspect who stole allegedly the 3's car, remain at large.
There's never been anything like this.
I mean, I can't say that I feel bad for them, but what a surprise when you really needed that car and it's not there for you. This story is awful, but wild. This driver, completely inebriated, thought he hit a deer, but in fact, hit a person, and the body of that person was found in the passenger seat of the car. I mean, how drunk do you have to be? This man is in custody.
I'm bad. I'm sorry.
That's not going to cut it. This man is in custody facing criminal charges after police say he fatally struck a pedestrian in Dallas, then drove about 40 miles to a fast food restaurant in a place called White Settlement with the victim's dead body in the passenger seat. White Settlement police say they were called to this restaurant parking lot at about 11:15 in the evening after a restaurant customer reported a vehicle in the parking lot with extensive damage. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel. The officer arrived, noticed a lifeless person in the front passenger seat. Police say they asked this driver, 31-year-old Nestor Lujan Flores, to exit the vehicle, and then they confirmed that the passenger was no longer living. The employees at the Jack in the Box at White Settlement say he'd come to the restaurant asking for a phone charger. They noticed he had blood on his shirt and on his hands. Police say they think the impact was so severe that the pedestrian was thrown inside the vehicle while this 45-year-old person was walking through a crosswalk. And this is awful. Parts of his body were recovered at the scene. The rest of his body in the passenger side of the vehicle. This is horrible. There was a large hole in the windshield. And again, this man drove 40 miles before he even got it. I mean, crazy. He didn't even realize this had happened. He didn't even attempt to stop to render aid or call for help. Nothing. And police say when you're impaired to this level, where you hit a pedestrian on the roadway and you think it's an animal, that, they say, is a very significant impairment. This is a case out of the Bay Area. This is a ex-rocker. He's a person of interest in a search for his missing girlfriend. And from what I understand, now they're both missing. This woman from Capitola and her ex-rock musician boyfriend involved in something. Alice, or Alex as they call her, Herman, she was last seen in Santa Cruz December 3rd. Her family members are very worried. They reported her missing December 12th when she failed to get in touch with them for more than a week. While searching for her, investigators in El Cerrito allegedly discovered her Highlander vehicle, her Toyota Highlander, parked in front of her boyfriend's house. Police identify him as Theobald or Theo Brooks Lengiel. He is 54 of El Cerrito. They made contact with him, but he's apparently not cooperating with the investigation. He's considered a person of interest in her disappearance. He was a founding member of a funk metal band called Mr. Bungle that was started up in Humboldt County. But I guess he left the band on pretty bad terms. They say he wasn't growing with the rest of the band. They were running out of things for him to do. So he got mad, he left the band, and his occupation now is software development. So, but apparently he's got a bunch of aliases and police have been trying to contact him and it's just not going well. So that is Law and Disorder.
Sorry, let me...
That's okay. We'll make it happen. I know it can be done.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Okay, one last thing before we go, and it's a story I wanted to bring you yesterday, but we kind of got too much packed into the show. George Santos, who just won't go away. And we have a video, Albert, if you can check it out. But this story is pretty amazing. George Santos was interviewed by a comedian named Zui Fumudo. And he explained very succinctly why he will never go away. He said, and he's, of course, known for lying. And she asks him, what can we do to get you to go away? And he said, stop inviting me to your gigs. And then he said, but you can't because people want the content. Let's check out the video.
What could we do to get you to go away?
Stop inviting me to your gigs.
So no Dancing with the Stars?
No.
No RuPaul's Drag Race?
I haven't got that invite yet. I'd love to go read a...
The lesson is to stop inviting you places.
But you can't, because people want the content.
What could we do to get you to go away?
Yeah, and that's it. People want the content. Same thing with Trump, right? And they know it. People want the content. People are interested. It's juicy. And I mean, it's newsworthy, but it's also content. And if they were ignored, they would go away. But because they know, people like Santos, that we can't ignore them because they keep putting themselves out there and it keeps being wackier and wackier, then they still stay in the news cycle and they still stay relevant. And he knows it. He just said it. You can't because people want the content. So I wanted to play that for you. I just thought that was so interesting that even he knows that. And still here we are talking about him again because there it goes. All right, some people to thank. You guys are so kind and supporting the show. And am just overwhelmed with gratitude, honestly, for all the ways that you do support us here on the Mark Thompson Show. I know we had $1 a day Pinky that came in to support the show, and I can't get back there to all the. I wanted to flash them on the screen, Albert. I don't know if you can help me out.
Oh, I think I removed them, but yeah, it was for a 10 from Luis.
Yeah, and Luis and $1 a day Pinky. Please go to themarkthompsonshow.com, themarkthompsonshow.com. That's where you can find our Patreon and PayPal links. So if you do want to support us every month in that way, we appreciate all the support we can get. As Mark continues his cruise, and we are here putting together, oh, look at that. There's the website. There's a lot of links on there. Got the merch link is there too, to the Mark Thompson Show coffee mug, which everybody needs. The Mark Thompson Show throw pillow, the sweatshirt. The sweatshirts are really nice. It's all there. So you'll find all of that there. And again, my tremendous thanks to everyone who supports the show. The chat today has been amazing. You guys have had such a great conversation. I really enjoyed reading everything along the way. So thank you for supporting us that way. I would also like to thank, since I'm doling out the thank yous, to thank Albert for coming on in and all the work you've done on the show. Thanks, Albert, for all the help today.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. All right. Please join me on the After Party Live. That is next with John Daly. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show. We've got David Katz on the show. We've got Belinda Weymouth with It's the Planet Stupid. It's going to be another really great Mark Thompson show, so I do hope you will join me for that. Until then, have a really great afternoon. Happy holidays, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
All the time. Bye-bye.